Stories of an Aircraft Builder. 2009, another year full of events. The reproduction of the printed aircraft fabric and the construction of the wing spars and wing ribs for the Rumpler C4 were added to the ongoing projects. In addition, work finally continued on the Fokker D7, the E3 was built further, and my own Fokker D8, the Engels E6 or Kuckuck, which remained here, got its wing. The D7, or the Engels E3, the D8, Engels E6, and the E3, the Engels E4, were registered as projects for my future museum at the Luftfahrtbundesamt, the German Civil Aviation Authority, and were under construction review. These tests also included load tests on components and assemblies that had already been built. For this year, a joint test of the fuselage, including loading of the landing gear and the engine mount as well as the tail unit, were planned for the D7. For the D8, investigations into the aeroelastic behavior of the wing and the flexibility of the control lines on the load were planned in preparation. For the E3, the construction of the fuselage and wings continued. There were also side projects for the friends in New Zealand. I was constantly asked to buy material or historical items, store them at my place and prepare them for shipment to New Zealand. At one point they wanted me to get large planks of wood, as it wasn't exactly easy to source local timber in New Zealand, of course. When the planks were organized, the stack was right in front of my small shed. It turned out that all the bark on the planks had to be peeled off, as this was required by the import regulations in New Zealand. Alexandra and I were busy with this for days. We also had to organize the materials for our own aircraft projects. These are things that most people are not so aware of. Here, it's really about explicit wood selection according to very specific criteria, and the processing of seasoned planks right down to small strips or layers of the spar stringers for the airplanes. You can't buy anything prefabricated here. In the beginning I did it all on my own, but as the projects progressed I enlisted the help of local carpenters who did the preliminary selection and rough preparatory work for me. I would particularly like to mention the brothers Hans and Georg Ulmer, who helped a lot and did a good job. I also had good relations with a small metalworking company at the time. The man's name was Rudolf Beutel. He also helped me a lot when it came to complicated metal parts. In the beginning I was allowed to use his machines and equipment. Later he did a lot of contract work for my airplanes and those of the New Zealanders. It was indeed a lot of work. I already mentioned the logged working hours and monthly reports that I kept for the New Zealanders. In addition, my airplanes were of course also fully logged, and the certification process. Records were kept and construction report books were written. Anyone who has never managed such projects as an individual will find it difficult to comprehend the logistical effort involved in building the aircraft. In essence, all that was done with the big stuff down at New Zealand with the Vintage Aviator Limited was done here on larger scale under my personal command. And then of course there was also a certain private life. This increasingly took place at the weekends and included gaining flying experience. I never missed a flying day as much as I could. This included a flight to the North Sea with friends from back then. I also got my aerobatic license in Altenburg with Starnke on the Zlin 526. My goodness, that was an experience. It lasted a whole week, getting into the plane in the morning and being shaken to the core. Get out of the plane and lay down on the grass to relax. Then it was the other student pilots' turns for an hour each. Then shouting, "Engels, let's go on!" And in the evening to the pub. Köstritzer beer. Oh, you get a very smooth bowel movement from it, said Jörg Lohmann, who did the training together with Paul Erhardt. I was miserable for 5 days in a row. Then suddenly it all went away and nothing bothered me anymore. Quite the opposite was the case. As soon as I got out of the airplane, I couldn't wait to get back up into the seat again and into the sky. Finally, green up again. My favorite part was the danger briefings, where Paul Ehrhardt dodgily tried to get the plane into an uncontrolled flight condition, then said, "You've got her!" and it went poof, and she was caught. It was all instinctive and obviously correct. He said once in the evening during a conversation that he had never seen a student pilot react so well so quickly in these situations. I accepted it with a swelling chest. In 2007-2008 I met Lothar Pierburg, a well-known aviation painter. He made a painting of my Olga for me and also captured the moment when I flew free in the Sleen 526. It was a crazy time when there was a lot going on. Flying free in German is meant when you fly solo for the first time on a new type. I had it with paintings anyway. I find them much nicer and more durable than photographs, especially if they are only available digitally. I also commissioned and paid for a family portrait from a painter on the Aerodrome forum back then. Unfortunately, nothing came of it and I never heard from her again. There is an annual event in Schondorf called Schondorfer Woche, Schondorfer Week, or short Schovo. There is also an associated classics car meeting, which I attended with a few vehicles. Alexandra demonstrated her 1943 Bob Phenomenon in a contemporary nurse's costume. That was in July 2009, and it was at this time that Jerry Moss wanted to visit me. We had been in contact via the internet for some time now, and he wanted to come and have a look for a few days. This developed into a friendship that has lasted to this day. He wrote down the details of his visit, and I will read them to you in the next episode. The classic cars I had, or vehicles I had, at the meeting were mainly light motorcycles, and 2 cars. It was Paul Ehrhardt, my flying instructor, who introduced me to them. He once said to me, "Achim, listen, if someone only ever deals with one subject, they get cranky. Find a balance, get a hobby." Well, that's what I did, but it had to smoke and stink, so I came across the express motorcycles by chance. They have been my little hobby horse ever since. I restored the first one in 2008, followed by others. There are also articles in classic car magazines about those and my work with them, which I will be happy to read out in subsequent episodes if you like. Jerry came on the day of the event and stayed for 2 weeks. During this time, the load tests were carried out on my D7, and he actively helped a lot. Shortly afterwards, I was invited back to New Zealand and found the 2 D8s standing untouched in the corners after almost 2 years. Flintstone Airways was jokingly written on the makeshift wooden wheels. The boxes, with the new built parts, which were still missing and could only be adapted to Cuckoo, were also still unopened next to them. I was told that I could now assemble the airplane. That was the time of truth, but I had already said that everything fitted perfectly. It was another great 2 weeks in New Zealand, and I was able to work on many projects. I have already mentioned that I was supposed to build a second Fokker D7 in exchange for a new Oberursel UR2 for my Cuckoo. It was almost finished, so Jean DeMarco showed me a rotary engine in a side hall and said, "That's yours. You'll get that one." Of course I was happy and thought I was one step closer to my first flying airplane in my own museum. My whole project stood or fell with this engine. There was another flying event in New Zealand that we were allowed to take part in. I helped assemble and disassemble 1 or 2 airplanes and met Fred Mirren and other like-minded pilots there. I also got my New Zealand license because I wanted to fly my planes, and the vintage aviator was willing to take me there for training. I received basic training on the 1943 Tiger Moth and was allowed to fly an Avro 504 with a rotary engine. I still had to take an English language test, which I had to do somewhere far away at an office, and pass as a native speaker. Then I flew a few laps on a Cessna with a flying instructor and subsequently received my New Zealand license. At those air shows we attended, my son Sven was allowed to fire the Luger 08, which belonged to the captain during the filming of King Kong. That was fun too. Apart from that, it was all great fun again. I liked my stays in New Zealand. I was also allowed to install the 2 new Oberursel engines that were intended for the 2 Engels E6 that they got from me. And on the day of our departure, we just managed to put the wings built by Koloman onto my fuselages. That was also the first fit, and it went really well. Finally, we took some great photos of one of the assembled and uncovered Fokker T8s. Then we headed back to the airport and off to Germany we went. The last really carefree year was coming to an end. In 2010, everything changed and the skins slowly began to float away. Soon, friends, soon it will be exciting.